And I am going to share my screen. And I am going to share a little slideshow that I used to start, which is probably going to be more useful to people that come and watch it. There's not very many slides, but it just kind of gives you an orientation to what's happening. And so this is the workshop about preparing art for an AOPR exhibition. And it probably pretty much applies to just about any exhibition you prepare art for, but there are some specific things that have to do with our hanging system that are pretty important. And let's see, this is an overview of what we're going to cover today. I'm actually going to start with something a little different before overview of frames, types, and characteristics. I'm going to install some D-rings and show you a little bit about how to hook wire to D-rings and do some stuff like that, because that's kind of the fundamental stuff at the bottom of everything. And then I'm going to run through a bunch of different frame types and the characteristics of those frames, because different people use different frames. And then we're going to talk a little bit about acceptable hanging methods for the AOPR hanging system, and then working with various types of frame mounts and wires and D-rings. But the wires and D-rings piece is going to be at the beginning, pretty much in this case. And this is the quick start for those people that don't really want to go to this workshop, but just want to know the facts, ma'am, as Joe Friday would say. The most important thing about preparing art for an AOPR show, or pretty much any show, is to make sure that your art is mounted in a solid frame or other method for hanging the art that allows for attaching a wire. You also want to make sure that your artwork itself is dry, that is, the paint's dry on it, or the glue's dry, or anything else that's holding it together is set. You want to make sure it's securely assembled, put together so pieces don't fall off of it. And then you want to transport it in a way so it doesn't get damaged. So to put it in bubble wrap or something like that, so that it gets, so that it's protected getting to where it's going. And then the other thing, which we're going to cover more today, is that it's wired securely with some kind of hardware like a D-ring. We'll get to that. And basically, you want to put the wire about 25 or 30% down from the top. I think we used to tell people to put it a couple inches from the top, but sometimes when people put it too high, when you hook the wire on, it sticks up above the frame. So put it about 25, maybe 30% down from the top, definitely well above the middle, so it'll hang correctly. And then for Arts of Point Richmond, we're pretty hard-nosed about making sure that you put a secure label on the back of your art that has at least your name and contact information. That's because, we get a little absent-minded and we may bring down some art and we don't even know who it belongs to. We'll figure it out eventually, but on the day that we're taking down art and giving it back, that's very important to know whose art it belongs to and how to contact them. And then make sure that you deliver your art and pick it up on the day that's indicated for that show, or arrange with somebody else to do this for you. And most of the art managers are pretty nice, and if you just forget, they're not going to throw your art out. They'll take it home and save it for you, but it's much nicer. They'll be really, really appreciate you if you show up or get somebody else to show up for you and pick it up. So now we're going to look at a video demonstration for some of this stuff, and I'm going to hide this screen and I'm going to open this screen. And this is a nice piece of software that I found by Elgato. It's actually free. You can install it on your iPhone and install it on your computer, and it transmits from the iPhone what it sees to your computer screen. So this is actually my computer camera. It's not a video on the camera. We are recording this hopefully from the from Zoom. So Zoom is taking care of all the recording. So the first thing I want to do is to run through something about wiring your art, and we'll show a bunch of examples of that. I've got this kind of frame and some other kind of frames that we'll look at. But to begin with, let's just look at wire for a minute. Now, the common kind of wire these days is this plastic coated wire. This is some number 6 wire. and this is some number 5 wire. And I pretty much use just number 6 wire, even on small pieces of art, but you can use number 5 wire also. Now, the plastic wire is nice to work with. It lets you have a kind of, I think it strengthens the wire. It has a kind of, you'll notice this is some metallic wire, which is not coated, and it's number 4 wire, and this is number 5 wire, but it's nice to work with because it's plastic coated, and it's actually a little bit smaller than the number 4 wire. The one thing that you might consider is that the hanging system that we have, because the wire goes over a kind of, well, it's sort of a V-shaped piece that's about 4 inches long. The wire goes over that. If you use this plastic wire, it's a little bit hard to slide the picture back and forth and get it right centered so it's hanging correctly. So some people, and I think I noticed in the toolbox, there was something in there that indicated that they wanted people to hang their wire with the uncoated wire. But the people that I've been working hanging artwork are perfectly happy to work with the coated plastic wire. So you can decide what you want, whether you want to use some uncoated wire or some coated plastic wire. The plastic wire certainly looks nicer. But this is I actually had been using plastic wire and got some uncoated wire because I thought I might want to use it sometimes because of the issue with our hanging system. And it was very hard to find any wire that wasn't coated. They just hardly sell it. And the first wire I bought was this sort of twisted wire, which is very stiff and hard to work with. And it's almost impossible. I mean, it's not impossible, but it makes it really difficult for art hanging purposes. This kind of wire, if you're going to buy metal wire, is the kind to get. It's braided wire. And it's much more flexible and works much better. So if you're going to use uncoated wire, braided wire is the kind of wire to get. So I'm going to show you how to install a D-ring now. This is a D-ring. And D-rings are universally known. You can get them, they come in slightly different shapes and sizes and stuff. But I'm going to install a D-ring. But before I do that, I want to run through some of the tools that I think it would be useful to have on hand if you're an artist and you're going to be stringing very, very many paintings with wire. One thing that I think everybody should own, whether you're an artist or not, whether you're stringing paintings or not, is an electric screwdriver like this. It's actually an electric drill. It works either as a screwdriver or a drill because it's so much easier to put in screws and get them out. You can see this one's variable speed, and you don't need a great big old screwdriver. This one's relatively small. And if you have a screwdriver, make sure that you have an extra battery, because there's nothing worse than going for your electric screwdriver and having it not work. So if you don't have an electric screwdriver, you need a manual screwdriver, and this is very convenient because this kind of manual screwdriver has a number of different tips in it. It's got big tips and small tips, and it's got slotted tips like this. These tips are called Phillips head tips, and this is a really useful kind of screwdriver to have for that. The other thing you're going to need if you're doing wire is something to cut wire with. And these are nice little small clippers that cut wire nicely. And these are some electricians' clippers that cut wire nicely. But my advice, if you're going to buy electricians' clippers, is don't go to the hardware store and buy the cheapest pair. Don't buy anything less than 20 bucks. The ones that are cheap, they cut wire, but they usually don't cut the whole wire, and you clip it and there's some strands hanging on, and it's a pain in the neck to get them loose. It's always useful to have a pair of pliers in case you have to kind of bend something or straighten something out or do something a little bit with it. And then I'm going to show you some picture frames later that have little teeny screws in them. So you might want a small screwdriver. You can see those are pretty different size screws. And then as far as the Phillips heads, like this one that's in the drill here, I don't know if you can see these very well, but there's two sizes here. This is one size here, and this is another size over here. These are the only sizes you'll probably ever need. This is like a PH1, and this is a PH2, or a size 1 and a size 2. And I would urge you to use the largest head the largest bit that will work with your screw. The reason for that is that if the bit's too small, and then when it goes into the screw, and if it doesn't fit in there really snug, you'll see that this Phillips head will go into this screw, and this is quite a small screw. This is the larger of those two size bits. It fits right in there, and it's snug. It holds tight, and it'll pull the screw out. If the bit's too small, you're going to find yourself stripping some of the screws, or even stripping the bit, because it'll spin around inside. Here's another little screw, and you can see that this large size bit fits just fine in there. Every once in a while, you'll get a screw that's too small. Probably not when you're hanging picture frames, but in some cases you need to use a smaller Phillips head, and they do sell smaller Phillips heads, but you just need a screw gun like this if you're going to use one, and maybe a size 1 and a size 2 bit, and an extra battery. So the next thing that I'm going to do is go ahead and put on one of these D-rings, but I want to show you the way. Well, this is what you'll need. You'll need a drill to insert one of these D-rings. The reason for that is that you could take a screw, take a little screw like one of these screws. This is a screw that screws down a D-ring, and you can try to get it started in here. You can get in here, and if you work at it, you can get it started. But you probably can't see this very well on this video, but let's see what you can do. You might notice that right below that screw, the wood started to split out just a little bit. So there's 2 reasons to use a pilot, to do a pilot hole. One of them is it makes it a lot easier to get your screw started. Now this was softwood, so the screw started pretty good in that, but some of these frames have much harder wood, and it's very difficult to get the screw started without a pilot hole. So what we need to do is to pick out a drill bit that we can use. I took a few of these, I think. You want to pick out a drill bit that's the right size for your screw. And people are usually surprised about this, but when you drill a hole for a screw, you want the bit to be the size of the screw minus the little wings that stick out the side, the little sort of curlicue things that stick out the side. Any smaller than that, the screw is going to actually push the wood apart, and it's not going to be very helpful. So you want a fairly decent sized screw when you're doing a pilot hole. Now here, with this screwdriver, I can take the Phillips bit out and put the screw in the drill in it like that. So I'm going to, another thing that's useful to have if you're doing this is a tape measure. And I'm going to measure this. This is 12 inches long, and I'm going to put it in at 25%. So 25% is 3 is 1/4 of 12. It goes into 12 4 times. So I could put it in either somewhere between 3 inches and 4 inches, somewhere between 25 and 30%. So what I'm going to do here is get a pencil, or a pen in this case, and I'm going to measure down on this side. I'm going to measure down 3.5 inches and put one little dot. And I'm going to measure down 3.5 inches and put one little dot right there. Now, the next question, which we probably should have asked ourselves before we put the dot there, is are we going to mount the D-ring on the surface like that, or are we going to mount it inside like that? Now, I kind of have gone out of my way to mount them on the inside because I think it keeps the wire down below the top of the frame right here. And that means that this frame can sit flat against the wall, and it doesn't hold it out at all. So let's try to do that. I'm going to put a mark on the inside like this. Now I'm going to put one over here. And if you're going to put the screws on the inside like that, for sure use a pilot hole, because it's really going to be hard to get your screw started without a pilot hole. And don't drill so that, don't make the hole come out the other side. That way you'll see it on the other side. So that's started now with 2 pilot holes. I'm going to take and put my screw bit in here and take a couple of screws. Stick this screw in here and stick it through the D-ring. And stick it in here like this. And there it is, nice and solid. Now you see that D-ring actually sticks up a little bit above there like that. And putting these D-rings on the top probably would have been just fine. But if you're a kind of perfectionist or sort of stubborn guy like me, you might want to put them on the inside so you can do your very best to hide the wire as much as you can. So let me get this started here and then I'll try to turn it around so you can see what I'm doing. Oops. See, it's kind of a pain in the neck to get these screwed in there. We're sitting flat on the table, it's going to be a little easier, but it's harder for me to put it on this side because I'm right-handed. It goes into the other side much better than me. Okay, so we've got 2 D-rings. Now the next thing we're going to do, and doing it this way actually makes it a little hard for me to show you, so I'm going to actually twist these things up, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of this. But I'm going to use some number 5 wire because I think I can show you with this better. The first thing you do is you pull out a piece of wire and give yourself 2 or 3 inches extra on each end. And then this is a trick that I actually learned a bunch of years ago from YouTube. So you can go learn it again on YouTube if you forget how to do it. But it's the problem with just putting wire through here like this and then bringing it around and just wrapping it around like this is that you can actually pull that loose. Now that was an extreme. I didn't wrap it as tight as I could have, but if you do it the way I'm going to show you, there's no way that the wire will pull loose from the D-ring. So you start off by putting the wire up through the D-ring like this. You fold it over like this, and you bring it around behind this wire like that. Then you stick it back through the D-ring. And you've got this, you see the wire is attached in there like that, so it can't ever pull out. And you bring it back around and wrap it around the wire like this. And you have a nice looking attachment that is going to be very strong. There's no way you can pull out. So I'm going to tighten this up. So let's do the same thing over here. Take this in from the back. Pull it up so it's tight and snug. Bring it around. So it comes all the way around the back. Can you see that okay? Slide it through here like this. Then you can see that you have you pull the wire so it's wrapped around the wire that's coming out from the D-ring. And then wrap this back around this wire a few times. Now, when I was first starting with this, I thought, well, it would be really cool to get some little metal ferrules, and instead of twisting this around, bring the wire around, put the ferrules on there and squish them together and have a nice permanent connection. It would look real slick. But I talked to a friend who's a curator, and I asked him what he thought about that. And what he told me is that when he's hanging pictures, he likes to sometimes loosen them up and change the length of the wire to help him hang it better. So I just twisted these things. They were up there when I put them on to show you. I twisted them around like that. And I'll show you one of the reasons that that's good to keep them down like that. You notice with this is a recessed frame. This is a wood frame that has a picture attached to it. And the wire here is the D-rings are set up on here so that the wire is out at the back surface of the D-ring. Now watch what happens when I hang it with the wire. You see how it angles in like that? Well, some of you that, I think Anna's seen this with me when we were working together. When you have something like this and you hang it up there on our kinds of frames, the thing can really sit at a quite stark angle. And we added some extra pieces onto the rod coming down to push the bottom out so it'll be vertical. But the other way to achieve that is when you put your D-ring in here. I'm going to loosen this D-ring. If you put the D-ring down towards the front of the frame, if I hang it like that, it's hanging perfectly vertical. So your show hangers will really like you if you put your wire into one of these recessed frames so it's close to the front of the frame. I'm going to come back over here for a second and hide this and make sure. So you guys are all still here? I didn't hear any of you say anything, but can you hear me and is everything going okay?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, still here listening.
Okay, great.
I have some questions if you want.
Okay, sure. Let me put the camera back on and then go ahead and ask me a question.
Where do you get the wire?
Well, I get it from Amazon.
Okay. So what's the brand?
Well, these two brands are called Soft Strand. This one doesn't seem to have a brand. It just says galvanized. There's a tremendous amount of wire on there. But just look around on Amazon, and I think the thing you want to know, I don't think the brand is important, but you want to know what size wire you want, whether you're looking for plastic coated wire or not. It's really hard to find the wire that's not plastic coated, and how heavy you want the wire to be. And I was a little unsure about weight of wire when I bought this, but I got some number 4, and I think it's about the same size as the number 6 coated wire. So it's kind of, you can do some experimenting with that, but you can get wire a lot of different places, and you can get smaller amounts of wire. I mean, I bought these, and you see, I've actually used quite a bit of this one. But so does that answer your question about that?
Yes, thank you.
So do other people have questions?
So
I do.
Kenoli.
I do.
Oh,
This
Okay,
is
go
Paige.
ahead.
I have a non-framed image that's going into Laura's fine dining at the end of the month. It's a piece of metal. And so it's see-through, so I don't have a place to put my name. And I guess I can just hang it from the holes in the metal, but I can't mount it like a picture.
well, I think what you will have to do is to talk to the person that's hanging the show and try to figure out a way to hang it that'll work for them. And I guess you can't, if it's see-through, you're not going to be able to put a tag on the back.
Right.
But you know,
So here it is.
Oh, there. Oh, look at that.
Yeah. So
We
it's
can see it.
Right. Yeah, I see that. Well, I think, I mean, well, if
So I
you
can
can
hang
hang
it
that
from
anywhere,
here.
you're going to have to figure out a way to hang it.
yeah, I can hang it from up
You
here,
can hang it from
but
up
there's
there.
there's no place for names.
Right, right. Well, you
Hey.
know, talk to whoever's running your show and tell them what your problem is and try to work
Okay.
something out with them.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Any other
Kenoli.
questions?
So Kenoli, there is. Am I? Yeah. Okay. If anybody is looking for uncoated wire, that's the only kind of wire that Michaels sells.
Oh, really? Well, there you go.
So, which was surprising to me, but that's it. And then Paige, I think if you talk to Louise, your piece is really unique. And I think we all know that it's yours. Because
You
I
know
know
what I
I'm
would do?
involved.
If I were hanging your piece, I'd want to have as little of the hanging mechanism visible as possible. And I think I would just try to put a small
Or in the middle.
sort of nail-like thing in the wall that's pretty small that can just it can just sit on at some point and just look like the piece itself. But you guys can figure that out.
Yeah, that's kind of up to them how they want to do it. I want to make it as easy for them as possible. So
Well, they'll work with you, and there's always special things like this that need to be taken into account. And people are good at doing that. Any more
it's-
questions right now? Okay, well, let's move ahead. And the next thing I was going to show you is, let me hang on. Oh, I guess we're back on we have the video going. The next thing I wanted to show you is a plastic frame. This is called a format style frame, and it's actually the name of it. And you can just squeeze these corners back, and then it releases the glass, and you can slide something in there. And there, zam, you got a frame. But you know, it's not a beautiful frame. It's not real sophisticated, but it may be a case where you don't want to show very much around the edges, and this could do that. Now the problem could, meet your needs. So the problem with this frame is that it just has a hole in the middle, and it's sort of designed for a push pin or just a picture hook to go in there, and it doesn't work very well with our hanging system. So I was going over this with Sharon the other day and wondering what we could do about it. And what I discovered is you can actually drill a little hole in the plastic. And once that hole's drilled, I can screw a D-ring into it, and there's a D-ring. Now you can put another one over here, and you got a wire going across. So you can kind of use your imagination, but a tip with this is the first time I drilled the hole, I chose a drill bit the way I told you to choose a drill bit. So it was pretty so it was the size of the shaft of the screw, and what stuck out around the sides were just the curly Q things going down. But when I screwed that screw into here, maybe you can see it, the plastic started to split. And so I realized for the case of this situation, I had to use a larger bit than I normally would. And I used a bit that was almost the size of the screw itself, but it's screwed in and grabbed tight. So you can do some improvising like that when you get to that point. Now next I'm gonna get rid of some of this wire so it's not in our way here. And show you something else. So a lot of you may use Nielsen frames. A lot of photographers I notice use Nielsen frames, and they're kind of convenient for putting together. You can buy them assembled, I guess, but you can also buy the individual pieces, and they go together, and these little L brackets in the corner here slip in, and they slip together, and you tighten the screws down, and it creates a nice frame. Now this frame I notice has kind of a bad corner here, you can see. So they're not perfect. I think maybe one of these things got bent somehow. We can't tell exactly, but you can assemble a Nielsen frame like this. And what I wanted to show you with this is Nielsen has a couple of ways of attaching wires. Here's one. These things sort of pop into these slits that are along the sides, and then you have two rings you can attach a wire to, and you can adjust them by sliding them up and down. It's very convenient. So that's one type of mounting that Nielsen has. The other thing that Nielsen has is this kind of mounting. You'll notice these have little teeny screws there. So this is one reason, this is one opportunity to use one of the small screwdrivers. You can just loosen those screws, slide it up. I don't know if you can see where I did. I slid it up like that. You can slide it back and forth, and then you can tighten it again. So that's very convenient. There are really some convenient things about Nielsen frames. You have to like the look of them. They have a bunch of different profiles, so they don't all just look like this, but I think you can get some to show a little wider along the side, but that'll sort of depend on what you want and what you think looks good with your art. You can get Nielsen frames in white. We used some for a while. We just decided to use them at some point and use some for a while, and we tend to like white frames, so we bought some of the Nielsen frames that were white. It's hard to find them, and I found out the reason it's hard to find them is that the white ones kind of get dinged. In other words, if the white can be chipped or scratched, and then they don't look good and they can't sell them. The black ones don't get dinged as much. They're much more resilient, and that's why it's a little hard to find the white ones. But we ordered some from afar, and got white ones. We have a bunch of Nielsen frames here actually, and they're all much bigger than anybody in AOPR I think wants to use. We'd love to find somebody that actually wants to use them. Now this is another frame that I think some of you may use. This is a cheap Pete's frame. And cheap Pete's frame are cheap. And they don't look too bad. I mean, they're a pretty good looking frame. You can tell they're wood and they go together, and they pretty much get their corners right. But they're just sort of stapled together in the corners, and they have some kind of cheap cardboard in the back here. And they don't have any specific way to hang them. So we put some D-rings in here. You can see these D-rings. I probably put these in here, and I think it's a lousy job, and I would never recommend this because I put them on the inside because I had this prejudice against putting them on the surface because I wanted this to be flat, but the D-rings were so big they pushed the wire up above the surface anyway. So I just want sort of an example of how not to do something. And what I would do with these D-rings is take them off and put them on the surface. But otherwise, the D-ring and everything is just working like everything else. So the cheap Pete frames are pretty good. You just have to figure out exactly how you want to. The clips. Oh, the Glazier's points? Yeah, I'm going to get to that in just a second. I'm going to talk about Glazier's points, but I'm going to talk about them in relationship to another kind of frame here. So here is another frame that came from Blix. Now, Glazier points are actually little things that glaziers, who are people that put in windows, use. These were designed to, here, let me show you on this other frame because you can see them better on this frame to begin with. There are these little metal things with points on them that are pushed into the side of the wood. Now, it's not that easy to push those in the side of the wood. You pretty much need a tool that does that. And this is a Logan dual driver elite. It's for inserting Glazier's points. Now watch, if I put this right there like that and go like that, it inserted a Glazier's point right there. Now there's two kinds of Glazier's points. There's the kind that bend like this, and there's the kind that you can't bend for the life of you. And I'm not sure why people would use the ones you can't bend, except they're definitely more permanent and they may be more useful around when you're hanging glass. But what's useful about the ones that bend, and here I'm going to use my pliers to pull this Glazier point out of here because we don't need it. You see, that's what the point looks like. It's got a sharp point on the end, and the driver just drove it into the wood. You can adjust the strength of the, how hard it's pushing the driver in with this screw right here. But what's useful about these is that you can bend them up like this. And take this panel that keeps the glass and everything going. Just take it out. Now, one good reason to take it out is that this is called a little sawtooth hanger, and there's a lot of cheap frames that have one of those in it, and they don't play well with our hanging system. It's very difficult to hang a piece of art with our hanging system using one of those. So the solution to that is to buy some of these little clips. What these clips do is that they snap onto the side of this little panel, and then you can hook a wire through that little hole and through that little hole and have a wire going across. So that's a solution to a frame. When you get a frame that has a panel on the back, and all it has is an alligator foot like this. And you can just bend your little glazier points up, take this thing out and install a couple of these clips. You can buy those if you end up doing very much of that kind of work. You can buy little bags of those for not really much money. Here's a little bag with 50 clips in it, which is a lot more than you use in a lifetime, but it probably just costs $10 or maybe less. And while we're talking about this, I'm going to talk about another thing that I haven't talked about yet. But most of the frames that we've looked at so far have little bumpers down at the bottom here. Actually, most of them don't, but some of them do. But at any rate, it's really useful to install these bumpers. The wire will go across here, and then at the bottom end, you install some bumpers like this. There's one little bumper that goes right there, and another one that goes here. And there's a couple of reasons for using these. One is that whenever somebody's hanging on their wall, they'll appreciate it because it makes it less likely you're going to scratch their wall. But the other reason that it's really useful is that you can adjust your painting by moving the wire back and forth and everything until it's hanging vertically. But if it's not quite right, these little bumpers will keep it from sliding back and forth, and you can kind of use it for the final fine-tuning adjustment to get it hanging totally vertically. So they're useful for both those purposes. And I always add those to frames when I'm framing them. There's some that are a little bigger, and those are some that are little teeny brown ones, and you can get different kinds. Here's some black ones that are more like feet than they are bumpers, but they're called vinyl bumpers. And at any rate, I highly recommend using little bumpers like that when you're putting your wire on your frame. Just add 2 of them down at the bottom like that. Now here's another kind of frame. This is the blick frame that I was telling you about. I started to show you with the glazier's points, and you couldn't see them because it's black. But the nice thing about this frame is that it comes with sort of built-in D-rings. There's one there and there's one there. And you'll notice there's a D-ring over here. So if you want to hang it vertically, you can turn this D here. You can't see, I didn't show them both. There's a D-ring here and a D-ring here. You can turn this over and stretch a wire across here so you can have a portrait hanging like this, or you can have a landscape using the wire the way it's stretched across here like that. So that's another thing you can look for on a frame. This is a larger frame that just came with some clips on it. These little clips that I showed you, these were actually came with this frame. So some frames will come like that, and that's particularly useful. Let's see, this is a stretched canvas. And the stretched canvas, this is something probably more than somebody that's stretching your canvas would worry about than you'll have to worry about. But this stretched canvas has the D-rings on the surface like this. Now, I told you before I had this prejudice about putting the D-rings on the inside so that the surface could sit flat against the wall. And I got in a little bit of trouble with stretching canvas for Louise because we had a stretcher bar like this, and you'll notice there's not very much wood there. So I screwed it in there, and I was careful that everything went in right, but she hung it at the show, and the person that took it down wasn't very careful, and they sort of jerked on it, and then it just kind of split that wood and pulled the screw right out. So if you have to make sure that where you put your D-ring and you have enough wood to get a good grip. So in this kind of a frame, I would recommend screwing your D-rings in like this on that surface. You have a much better chance of having your screw grab in there. So I think we've covered most of the things about wire, but I want to show you a few problem issues. One is, well, it was nice that that we got to see the issue with having a kind of hanging that it's just impossible to put a wire on. This is another one. If sometimes people just paint on masonite like this, and then you just have a board like this, and what are you going to do with it? I think if that's the case, you're just going to have to put it in a frame of some sort. You can buy frames that are designed to hold a piece of masonite like this, you know, sort of 8-inch thick, because there's not much of any other way to attach it. This is the other solution, of course, if you want to paint on wood, is to buy a panel like this that already has wood strips attached to it on the back, and then you can hook your wire up to these strips. They also make frames that are designed to take a panel like that, or to take a 3/4 inch deep stretched canvas. And it just fits right in. They're designed for that depth. And this is the kind of frame you should just never use. It's a poster frame. You know, all the psychedelic posters and everything were all made to this dimension, and they sell lots of these because people buy posters and then they just stick them in here and snap it together. But these have plastic fronts, and they're not very professional, as Sharon said. Now, I don't know, this one here has a couple of D-rings, one there and one there, and I think this one's just designed so you could put it in a picture frame hook there, or this one to put a picture hook there. But this, I don't think you even want to use one of these because it's not going to enhance your art and make it look nice. But that's just an example of how to avoid certain types of frames that aren't going to serve you well. So now I'm going to show you, this is a whole nother little piece here, but this is something else that affects the hanging of your art. Now this is a mat, and if you're going to you may take a piece of paper, you know, some artwork that you've done on paper or some thing, and you mount it behind the opening of the mat. And what I want to show you about this is that there's a way to do this and a way not to do it. The way not to do it is you don't put your paper on here and then put tape all around the edges like that. And one reason for that is that if you put tape on all the different sides, your art can't adjust itself and lie flat. So you have the problem of getting some buckling. The other problem is that you've got a really nice fine piece of art here. I mean, this could be an art by Edgar Degas or something like that. And you don't want to put so much tape on it that taking off the tape is going to ruin your artwork. So there's a very formal way of doing this, which was done, you know, way, way back, forever. And that is to create a hinge. Now this is traditional linen hanging tape. This is traditional linen hanging tape that has, some gummed glue on the back that's water activated. In other words, it's not sticky until you put water on it. It's like, like library tape used to be. Break it and then it would stick down. Well, this is something that archivists and professional framers and stuff like to use because you can put it on with water, it'll dry. You just use a small amount of water, not enough to hurt the painting itself. But when you want to get it off, you can just moisten it a little bit and give it a few minutes and it'll just come off without hurting the painting. What's more common nowadays is self-adhesive material. And that's like this. You can get it in a box like this so the stuff pulls out. And then you can cut it off. You need a pair of scissors. And then there's a very specific way of doing this. My scissors keep getting gummed up and I have to clean them off with acetone. But this is the correct way to hinge an image like this. You take one piece of tape like this. That's the problem with cutting adhesive tape, is it tends to stick to the scissors, especially if they've been cutting adhesive tape before. You take one piece of tape and you put it like this. Well, first first, of course, you need to, get your image lined up correctly inside the mat. And you can do that by moving it around until it's correct. And then very carefully turn it over so it's in the right place. But once you get it lined up, you take your tape and you, at the very top, you put your tape in like that. And I'll turn this around. You can see this, see it like this one better. Or maybe not. But anyway, you put a piece of tape like that. And then you take a second piece of tape. See if I can cut this one thing. You take a second piece of tape and put it like that. And then you take 2 more pieces of tape, like this, and you put it across like in a T. And that makes sure that that tape sticks well to the mat in the back. And then if I can get another piece of tape out of here, I didn't do it quite right this time.
It's really hard to get that tape to sometimes to unpeel.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes.
Anyway, you put that and you put it across like that. So that's the correct way of attaching a piece of art to the back of a mat.
And show, could you bring it lower? We can't see. Show where how it looks, the way it sort of hinges off the top, if you can. I'm not sure.
So it goes
There, now we can see.
up like that. And
Yeah.
it can sit
And then it
flat.
just,
It can find its own way
yeah,
to sitting flat.
yeah.
And you don't have all kinds of tape around the side. And when you put all this other extra tape on here, it makes it sit so it doesn't sit right in the frame. And I think the person that's hanging your art will appreciate that. I mean, I've worked with people that brought art in, and they've done something like this, and they just had, they hooked it on with gaffer's tape or something like that, and it was very hard to get it to sit flat. So that's pretty much the one thing I wanted to show you about actually framing your art. There's a lot more about framing, but so far we're just looking at largely at the stuff that affects artwork when it's hung in an AOPR show. And that's pretty much it. So let me get back over here and we'll get rid of this. And we'll go back to Keynote, which is right here. And this is what we just saw. And there's the next slide. So that's all, folks. But we do have an opportunity for questions. So why don't you ask some questions if you've got them, and we can work on that.
So I have the same kind of questions about the clips and the bumpers and the tape. Like, what are the brand names and where did you get them?
I have absolutely no idea. I pretty much, it's not very politically correct, but I pretty much, when I want something, I get onto Amazon and I look for it. And when I find something, I get it. Now I bought 3 different kinds of bumpers until I got the kind I liked. So
just tell them what they're called so they can.
Well, I can tell, see if, I don't think there's any names on these. Let me see. Well, these little black ones, as I mentioned, they're just called vinyl bumpers.
Okay.
I think I got this online too.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, you can get that. You can walk into Blix and buy that, or you can get it online. You can pretty much buy that anywhere too. But it's the main thing about that is to know there's a bunch of different kinds of linen mounting tape, and I think for the most part you're going to want self-adhesive tape. The self-adhesive tape they put on those things is pretty good, and it comes off. It's pretty secure.
Yeah, this is self-adhesive.
Yeah, it stays on and it comes off without ruining your artwork. Like I said, the formal way to do it is to use something that's water soluble so you can get it off that way. And I don't know about the brands on I guess pretty much, I guess you got your answer more or less from Anna and elsewhere.
But how about those clips?
Oh, the clips. Yeah, let me tell you what well, these don't really have a brand name there. They're made in China. And I don't like them very much. The reason I don't like them is, for one thing, they're soft metal, so that once you put them on and taking them off, it's hard to get them to hold tight again. The other thing is that at the top here, I don't know if you can see it, it's actually a little
alligator.
sawtooth type thing. It's not just a round thing. I think it was designed actually to go on a board and hang off of a hook like that, which is not really, we're trying to use it for wire. So I think you could probably find some clips like that, which have little round things at the top like that. These are just called they're called S-shaped photo album photo artwork frames. And I don't know the brand name. So, any other questions?
I
Adam.
guess I sort of have a question. There was one, when you use that little inset bracket thing, I think it must have been a frame where there was a low wood profile or a small wood profile.
Are you
And so there
talking
wasn't
about-
enough room for a D-ring. I mean, my thought was, why not just use a D-ring? And instead you put the little side bracket things in, but maybe that's when there's not room for a D-ring, those are your.
Yeah, there's no reason not to use a D-ring if you can get it to fit in there okay. And they do have different size D-rings, but yeah.
Yeah, I've got a couple of different sizes. But
Yeah,
it's true that even the small ones, sometimes the frame is, anyway.
Yeah, it depends on the frame.
Thanks.
You just have to, and what I found since then, like I told you, I kind of had this addiction to try to screw them onto the inside of the frame because I thought it made the wire less visible. But I noticed that lots and lots of people are screwing them onto the surface of the frame, and it works just fine. I think there's very few times that your picture needs to hang flat against the wall exactly, or even you could even get it to do that. And with our hanging system, you can't do that because there's a 1/4 inch rod that comes down that holds the top of it at least that far away from the wall. So in the case with our hanging system, there's no real advantage. It's good to sometime, I would recommend, if you're interested in this, volunteer to go help hang some paintings. And when you do that, you'll get a chance, for one thing, you'll get a chance to know our hanging system, and you'll get a chance to solve some hanging problems with that obnoxious artists that didn't do it right did when they brought their painting in, and you can complain to them and get arrogant and insulted and things like that. So I guess that's all, folks.
Okay, thanks a lot, Kenoli.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Kenoli, thanks very much.
Thank you.